Among the thousands of cases investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren, one particular encounter stood out not only for its chilling severity, but for the emotional scars it left behind. This case would forever haunt the Warrens, not because of the demonic force they faced, but because of the young life at stake. Prepare yourself to dive into a terrifying true story of innocence corrupted, of parents desperate for help, and of a spiritual battle unlike any other. The small town of Brookfield, Connecticut was the kind of place where everyone knew each other by name, where front doors were left unlocked, and children rode their bikes until the sun dipped beneath the horizon. But that sense of safety would soon be shattered. It began quietly. Neighbors noticed that the Madsen family, who had just moved into a modest colonial-style house near the edge of town, were keeping to themselves more than usual. Rumors circulated. The boy wasn't well. The father had quit his job unexpectedly. The mother had been seen crying at church. In a town where silence could be louder than any scream, people began to whisper. Inside that house, 9-year-old Daniel Madsen sat on the floor of his bedroom, rocking gently. His eyes, once bright and filled with curiosity, now seemed distant, hollow. It wasn't that he didn't speak anymore. It was that when he did, the words didn't sound like his. His voice would shift unexpectedly, dropping into tones far too low for a child. Sometimes, he would stare at nothing, his mouth moving in silent prayer or curses. Furniture moved. Objects broke without reason. One night, Daniel's mother, Emily, woke to find him standing over her bed, staring blankly, muttering in Latin, a language no one in the house had ever spoken. At first, they sought medical answers. Psychologists, neurologists, blood tests, CT scans, nothing, no diagnosis, no treatment. He's a troubled child, one doctor finally said, almost dismissively. Perhaps trauma-related. Intensive therapy may help. But Emily knew better. This wasn't psychological. This was spiritual. The real breaking point came one night, when Daniel's older sister, Melissa, screamed so loudly the neighbors called the police. She claimed Daniel had tried to push her down the stairs, his face twisted in a grotesque grin. When officers arrived, Daniel was in the basement, sitting in the dark, surrounded by dead birds. They'd flown in, he said, to talk to him. The house grew darker each day. The smell of rot seeped into the walls, even though the place was spotless. Shadows moved against the direction of light, and Daniel's behavior escalated. Growls, scratches on the walls, and violent outbursts during prayer. That's when Emily made a decision that would change their lives forever. She reached for a name she had only heard whispered once at a church support group, Ed and Lorraine Warren. She found their number in a worn-down paperback about the Perron family haunting. It rang 3 times before a calm, almost ethereal voice answered. It was Lorraine. Emily could barely speak through her tears. But when she did, Lorraine's tone changed instantly. "Hold on, sweetheart. We'll come to you. Just hold on." As the Warrens packed their bags and prepared for yet another encounter with the unknown, neither of them realized this would be the one case that would haunt them beyond all others. Not because of the demon, but because of the innocence it threatened to devour. When Ed and Lorraine Warren arrived in Brookfield, the skies were unusually overcast. It was late autumn, and a damp chill clung to the air as if the town itself was holding its breath. The Madsen home sat at the edge of a thickly wooded area, partially obscured by leafless trees. Lorraine would later recall a strange sensation the moment they stepped onto the property, like a presence watching from the windows that no one had opened. Emily greeted them with a haunted expression. Her eyes were swollen, not just from tears, but from weeks of sleepless nights. Inside, the house was neat, but every room felt as if it had aged 100 years. The atmosphere was heavy, like walking through water. "Where's Daniel now?" Lorraine asked gently. "In his room." "He hasn't come out since yesterday," Emily whispered. They ascended the stairs slowly, each step creaking as if warning them to turn back. Daniel's room was dark, the blinds drawn, even though it was midday. The boy was sitting in a corner, hugging his knees. When he looked up, Ed felt a chill race down his spine. It wasn't the boy's face that disturbed him. It was the eyes. Pitch black, devoid of the usual spark of childhood, hollow, as if something else was behind them, watching. "Hi, Daniel," Lorraine said softly. "My name is Lorraine. This is Ed. We're here to help." The boy didn't move. Then, without warning, he began to whisper. At first, it was inaudible. Lorraine leaned in. Then her eyes widened. "Ad me venit, non relinquum," he muttered. Repeatedly. "It's Latin," Ed said. "He's saying, 'It has come to me. It will not leave.'" Emily's hands trembled. "We don't speak Latin. He's never even heard it." That night, the Warrens stayed in the home. They needed to observe, to understand what they were dealing with. Ed set up audio recorders and motion sensors. Lorraine kept a rosary nearby and sat with Daniel, reading psalms aloud. It wasn't long before the house began to show its resistance. Idu. Exactly 3:09 a.m., every recorder picked up a deep growl, low and resonant, coming from Daniel's room. Ed rushed in to find the boy levitating nearly a foot off the bed, his arms stretched out unnaturally. Lorraine, frozen in the hallway, gasped. A dark shadow loomed behind the boy, not visible with the naked eye, but unmistakable in its energy. Ed grabbed the boy and recited the Lord's Prayer, his voice unwavering. Daniel dropped with a thud, unconscious. The shadow vanished. The next morning, Ed sat with Emily and explained what they were now certain of. Daniel was in the grip of a demonic force. "This isn't a haunting. This is a possession in progress, and if we don't act soon, we may lose him completely." Emily broke down. "Why my son? Why us?" "There's often no simple answer," Lorraine said. "But sometimes these entities are drawn to innocence, to weakness, or to unhealed wounds in the family. We need to know everything. Every detail about Daniel's life, your family's history, this house." That was when Emily hesitated. Her face changed, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "There's something I never told anyone," she said. "Daniel, he used to talk to someone at night. He called it the quiet man. We thought it was an imaginary friend. But one night he came to our room crying, saying the quiet man wanted to show him a secret. And after that, everything changed." Lorraine felt a chill crawl down her spine. "He was invited in," she whispered. It was no longer a question of if. The demon was inside, and it had no intention of leaving. What do you think of Daniel's condition so far? Could you imagine facing something like this in your own home? Share your thoughts in the comments. In the days that followed, Ed and Lorraine made the Madsen home their base of operations. Every corner of the house was examined. Every piece of Daniel's past was brought under scrutiny. Lorraine conducted psychic sweeps of the rooms, identifying cold spots and psychic residue that suggested a sustained, powerful presence. The attic was particularly troubling. Lorraine refused to enter at first. When Ed insisted, she relented, but what she saw left her pale and trembling. Scratched into the wood along the attic walls were dozens of symbols, some ancient, some resembling sigils used in summoning rituals. The family swore they had never seen them before. The dust around them was undisturbed, as if someone, or something, had etched them long ago. Back downstairs, Emily broke. "I can't take it anymore," she sobbed, collapsing into Lorraine's arms. "My son is gone. That thing, it looks like him, but it isn't. His voice, his smile, it's all wrong. We're going to need the church," Ed said grimly. "This is beyond what we can handle alone." They reached out to Father Caleb Montrose, an experienced exorcist who had worked with the Warrens in the past. But when he arrived and stepped into the house, something strange happened. He immediately became nauseous, nearly collapsing. "This place is defiled," he whispered. "There's something here. Something that doesn't just possess, it feeds." He left that same night, promising to return with authorization from the diocese. But days passed, and no word came. Emily called the rectory, no answer. When Ed drove there personally, he found the parish dark and locked. Father Montrose had vanished. It became clear that formal church support might not come in time, or at all. We'll do it ourselves, Ed said, pacing the living room. We've done it before, and we'll do it again. Lorraine hesitated. But this one is different, Ed. I feel it watching us, learning from us. It's waiting. That night, Emily came to Lorraine with a box she had never dared to open until now. It contained drawings Daniel had made months before the manifestations began. Most were childish doodles, trees, animals, family members. But tucked in the back were darker sketches. A faceless man in a long coat standing in the corner of Daniel's room. A mass of twisted limbs under his bed. A shadow with red eyes and claws, labeled simply, him. We thought it was just imagination, Emily whispered. Ed took the drawings in silence. He had seen similar figures before, not in drawings, but in nightmares relayed by other possessed children. That night, the temperature in the house dropped to near freezing. The crosses on the wall turned upside down, and from Daniel's room came a sound no child should ever make, a low, guttural laugh that reverberated through the entire house. The Warrens had faced horrors beyond counting. They had walked through homes soaked in spiritual residue, exorcised demons from the broken and the damned, and stared into the blackest eyes of evil. But something about Daniel's case felt heavier, more deliberate, like they weren't just confronting darkness, but something calculating. From the moment they entered Daniel's room again, Lorraine felt it, a shift in pressure, as though the air itself recoiled. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, motionless. His eyes flicked toward Lorraine as she stepped inside, and for a split second she saw it. Not fear, not pain, but triumph. Whatever was inside him believed it was winning. "We need to speak to it," Lorraine said. "We need to know what it wants." Ed frowned. "It's dangerous, I know, but it's already inside. If we don't engage it, it'll continue hiding and growing stronger." They cleared the dining room again for a controlled seance. The table was draped in white cloth. 4 blessed candles marked each cardinal direction. Holy water was sprinkled on the walls. Lorraine brought a locket containing a relic of Saint Benedict, while Ed prepared his old leather-bound ritual book. Daniel was brought in. His body was limp, but his eyes were wide open and wrong. There was no light in them, no fear, only stillness. Lorraine sat across from him and took his small, cold hands in hers. She closed her eyes and whispered the Lord's Prayer, her voice trembling. Ed stood behind her, crucifix in hand, his face grim and focused. It began slowly. A creak in the floorboards, a flicker in the candle flames. Then, a deep vibration in the table. Not a shake, but a pulse, like a heartbeat beneath the wood. And then Daniel smiled. But it wasn't his smile. The voice that emerged was low and deliberate. "You've come to bargain, witch." Lorraine's eyes opened wide. "You know who I am." The smile widened. "Of course. You've touched the veil more times than you should. You dance with angels and pretend you don't enjoy the fire." Ed stepped forward. "Leave the boy, now." The thing inside Daniel turned to him. "And you, still clinging to that cross, like it means something." This child asked. "I came. I was invited." Lorraine's heart sank. "What do you mean?" he asked. The voice shifted, now higher, almost childlike. He was lonely. They ignored him. "I listened. I whispered." He answered. Emily, watching from the doorway, gasped. "No." The voice mocked her. "Oh yes, he wanted a friend. And I am a very old friend." Ed opened his ritual book and began reciting a binding prayer. Instantly, the temperature in the room plummeted. Frost formed on the windows. The candles extinguished with sharp cracks. Daniel's body jerked violently, but the entity didn't leave. "You cannot bind me," it hissed. "He is mine now. His soul is marked." The crucifix in Ed's hand glowed red-hot. He winced, forcing himself to hold it tighter. Lorraine stood, her eyes burning with tears. "You don't belong here," she said. "You may have found a way in, but you will not stay." The entity laughed, a sound that came from both Daniel's mouth and from somewhere else entirely, like an echo inside a cave. "We'll see." With a sudden jolt, Daniel collapsed, unconscious. The table cracked down the middle. Every light in the house went out. Silence. Lorraine knelt beside the boy, checking his pulse. It was weak, but steady. She looked up at Ed, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is no ordinary demon. It's something else. Something older." That night, Ed didn't sleep. He sat with a Bible on his lap and a shotgun by the door, not because he believed it would help, but because something primal told him to keep watch. And in the darkness, from the woods behind the house, came the sound of something moving. Slow, heavy footsteps, circling, waiting. This was no longer an investigation. It was survival. The following morning was quiet. Too quiet. The house, usually filled with the creaks and whispers of unrest, was still. Ed and Lorraine sat at the kitchen table, going over Father Montrose's ritual notes. But both knew they were running out of time. Lorraine reached out to her contact at the diocese again. This time she got a cold, automated message. "This number is no longer in service." It was as if Montrose had been erased. "Ed," she said, voice trembling, "something is keeping the church away." "I know," he replied, "but we don't need their permission to fight." That night, Ed prepared for the cleansing. He began with a traditional binding ritual, reinforced with readings from the Ritual Romanum. Lorraine created a protective circle in Daniel's room, placing crucifixes, salt, holy water, and a blessed candle in each corner. Daniel was strapped down again, not for punishment, but protection. His body had become unpredictable, often convulsing without warning, or hurling objects at anyone who got close. Even Melissa had been scratched across her cheek in a moment of sudden violence. Ed knelt beside the boy and began the prayer. The Latin rolled off his tongue. "Exorcizo te, immundissime spiritus, omnis incursio adversari, omne phantasma." As the words filled the room, the temperature dropped again. Daniel's breath fogged. He began to thrash, his voice emerging in a chorus of screams, multiple voices at once, male and female, old and young. A hideous cacophony. The candlelight flickered violently. One by one, the flames extinguished. A sudden gust of wind blew through the room, slamming the door shut and locking it from the inside. Lorraine reached for her relic and began chanting, alongside Ed. Then Daniel's back arched. From his mouth came a sound that could only be described as a roar, not human, not animal. Something ancient. Ed kept reading, louder now. "In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti." The air crackled, and the salt lines around the bed began to burn. A foul smell filled the room. Sulfur, decay, rot. Then it happened. A form emerged behind Daniel, shadowy, indistinct, but undeniably present. Its eyes glowed faint red, and it whispered something that made Lorraine drop her relic. "You've seen me before. In your dreams." Lorraine froze. She had. Years ago. During the Amityville investigation. In a mirror that shattered when she approached. The ritual was disrupted by a loud screech as Daniel's body contorted in unnatural ways. His shoulders popped. His fingers twisted backward. Lorraine screamed, "We have to stop!" Ed slammed the book shut and rushed to the boy. Daniel collapsed, unconscious, his breathing shallow. The entity had not been exorcised, but it had been challenged. That night, Lorraine recorded her vision in a journal. A tower surrounded by fire, a boy in white screaming from a window, and a shadow with no face pulling the walls down. Whatever this was, it didn't just want Daniel. It wanted a legacy. With the failure of the ritual still hanging heavy in the air, Lorraine knew they had to try something else, something more dangerous. She would have to make direct contact with the entity on its plane. It was called trance walking. A psychic journey Lorraine had only attempted a few times before. It required complete mental surrender and immense spiritual protection. The risks were enormous. If she went too deep, she might not return. They prepared the basement, cold, stone-lined, and empty. Lorraine sat in the center of a protective eye, circle drawn with chalk and blessed by Ed. Around her, candles flickered softly. Emily held Daniel's hand upstairs. while Ed watched Lorraine, ready to pull her back if things went wrong. She closed her eyes and began her descent into the spiritual veil. At first, there was nothing but silence, then a humming sound, like distant static. She moved forward, deeper, and soon a landscape began to form. Not physical, but emotional, a place of cold winds, cracked ground, and skyless dark. Shadows flitted past her, whispers echoed, and then she saw it. A figure stood atop a mound of bones, cloaked in tattered cloth, face hidden in darkness. It exuded malice so pure Lorraine could hardly breathe. At its feet knelt Daniel, chained, eyes blank. Lorraine stepped forward. "Release him." The entity turned its faceless head toward her. "You again. Let the boy go. Take me if you must." A pause, then laughter, bitter and bone deep. "You offer yourself? Do you know what you're offering?" Lorraine's heart pounded. "I do." The entity extended a clawed hand. Then, look at what you fear most." Suddenly, vision slammed into her. Ed's lifeless body, their home in flames, the museum destroyed, demons laughing in every corner. The pressure was unbearable, but she didn't look away. She screamed a name, Daniel's true name, his baptismal name, whispered to her by Emily days before. The chains broke. The entity shrieked, and then Lorraine woke up, gasping, covered in cold sweat. Ed was holding her, tears in his eyes. "I saw him, Ed. I saw where he's being kept, but we can still reach him. He's still fighting." Daniel stirred upstairs. For the first time in weeks, he murmured something coherent. "Lorraine." It was his voice, the real one. "Thank you so much for sticking with us on this intense journey so far. The best is yet to come. What's happening with Daniel is just the beginning. Click the follow button and help us tell more stories like this." The night after Lorraine's trance was unlike any other. Daniel had spoken her name, his real voice, frail and fleeting, but it was enough to ignite hope. Still, Ed knew from experience that hope often provoked retaliation. Evil does not retreat. Quietly, they fortified the house. Psalms were inscribed in chalk above the doorways, relics were placed at every window, and Emily and Melissa were given blessed medals to wear around their necks. Every precaution was taken, and then, at 2:33 a.m. it began. Daniel's screams shattered the silence, not cries of pain, howls, primal and unending, vibrating through the walls. Lorraine and Ed rushed to his room, only to find the boy levitating again, eyes rolled back, mouth wide open. But this time, it wasn't just him. The walls bled. Crimson. Streaks ran down the floral wallpaper as if the house itself were in pain. A sulfuric stench filled the air. The floorboards groaned and cracked under invisible weight. Shadows moved independently from the furniture, stretching across the ceiling like tendrils. Lorraine clutched her relic and began praying aloud. "Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle." But a deep growl interrupted her. The furniture exploded outward, sending Ed and Lorraine to the floor. Melissa screamed from her room. Emily ran upstairs, but was thrown violently down the stairs by an unseen force. The family was under siege. Ed crawled to the foot of Daniel's bed. The boy's body convulsed with supernatural violence, his spine arching dangerously. "Hold on, son," Ed murmured. "Just hold on." Lorraine felt a sudden pulse in her mind, a psychic assault. She clutched her head and screamed as images of burning churches, rotting corpses, and a child's voice begging for death flooded her senses. The entity was attacking her from within. She steadied herself and focused, chanting Latin exorcisms from memory. Suddenly, the door to Daniel's room slammed shut and locked. They were trapped. And then came the worst sound of all. Laughter. Not from Daniel, but from all around them. The room echoed with the sound of hundreds of voices, laughing in unison. Some high-pitched, others guttural, some mocking, others filled. With glee, Ed stood, his voice a roar against the chaos. "You cannot have him!" He threw holy water in every direction. The laughter stopped. For one breathless moment, all was silent. Then the room burst into flame. But it wasn't fire that burned. It was light, blinding, searing, divine. Daniel dropped to the bed like a stone. The shadows vanished. The walls stopped bleeding. The door creaked open. Lorraine stood still, tears in her eyes. Something intervened, she whispered. That wasn't us. Something answered. Daniel was unconscious but breathing, his skin warm again. The storm had passed, but the war wasn't. Over dawn broke with trembling light. The Madsen home was eerily calm, the kind of quiet that comes only after chaos. Emily sat by Daniel's side, brushing his hair with a trembling hand, while Melissa refused to leave her room, still shaken. Ed contacted Father Corrigan, a distant but trusted friend, not directly tied to the diocese. Corrigan, a man of quiet resolve, had faced evil in the jungles of South America and the war-torn churches of Eastern Europe. When he heard Daniel's story, he agreed to come. No authorization, no red tape. He arrived within hours, bearing only a suitcase and a single crucifix worn with time. "I've seen the devil," he said, "and this smells like him." That evening, with dusk approaching, the exorcism began. Daniel, now lucid but weak, was moved into the living room, which had been stripped of all furniture except for one wooden chair. A circle of salt and blessed chalk enclosed the area. Lorraine anointed the boy's forehead, while Corrigan and Ed recited preparatory prayers. The moment the ritual began, Daniel's eyes snapped open and turned black. He hissed, "I knew you'd bring him," the old priest, full of fear. Corrigan didn't flinch. "You're not speaking to me, creature. You're speaking to God through me," the entity roared. The temperature plummeted, the windows iced over, lights shattered. And then Daniel began to lift off the chair again, his back arching. "In nomine Jesu Christi, exorcizo te." Corrigan's voice was thunderous. He held the crucifix aloft, his voice unwavering even as blood began to drip from Daniel's nose, ears, and mouth. Lorraine clutched Emily's hand. "Stay strong," she whispered. "He can hear you." The entity fought harder. Daniel's body twisted violently. He screamed, cried, begged, then suddenly laughed, a low, gravelly adult laugh from a boy's throat. "You're too late. He's already mine." But Ed didn't believe it. He stepped forward with Daniel's baptismal certificate. "This child belongs to the Lord." Corrigan poured holy water on Daniel's head. The boy shrieked in pain, the sound inhuman. "No!" the voice roared. "He chose me." "Then he can choose again," Lorraine said. She stepped into the circle, placing a hand on Daniel's chest. "Daniel," she said softly, "if you can hear me, choose. Choose the light. Choose love. Choose your mother." For a moment, nothing. Then, Daniel's eyes blinked. Once, twice, and he screamed. A blinding light erupted from his body. The entity shrieked, a sound so sharp it shattered the living room mirror. Every candle extinguished. Then silence. Daniel collapsed into Lorraine's arms, the air warmed. The salt line turned to dust, and Daniel whispered, "Is it over?" Corrigan knelt. "Yes, child, it's over." But Ed knew better. They had won the battle, but some wars never truly end. The days following the exorcism were filled with an eerie quiet. The Madsen home, once a battlefield of spiritual chaos, now felt abandoned, not just by the entity, but by the very life it once held. Daniel remained weak but responsive. He spoke little, often staring out the window as if searching for something he feared might return. Emily and Melissa tried to return to routine, but their innocence had been torn open. Even the most mundane activities, preparing breakfast, folding laundry, walking through the hallway, were now punctuated by lingering dread. Lorraine stayed close to Daniel, helping him rebuild his emotional world. She guided him through prayer, encouraged journaling, and gently asked about what he remembered. "I remember the dark," he said once, "but not like night. It was alive, and it hated me." Ed continued documenting the case. Photographs, audio tapes, journals. He compiled every detail meticulously, not just for research, but because he needed the proof. Proof that what they had fought was real. That it hadn't just been a nightmare shared by all of them, but the signs of residual presence were still there. One night, Melissa woke up screaming, claiming she saw the quiet man standing in the corner again. Lorraine investigated, but found nothing. Still, she noticed one of the bedroom walls was unusually cold, and the family dog refused to enter Daniel's room, growling every time it got near. Ed took it as a sign. "We drove it out," he told Lorraine. "But it's not gone. It's watching, waiting," Lorraine agreed. "It won't return through Daniel, but it may seek another door." Daniel's therapy continued, both with Lorraine's spiritual guidance and with professional counseling. He would have night terrors, sometimes waking up in a cold sweat, whispering Latin phrases he couldn't understand. Once he asked Lorraine, "Why did it choose me?" She knelt beside him. "Because you were open, because you were kind." Evil twists those things, but kindness is also your shield now. The community's response was mixed. Some praised the Warrens for saving a child. Others whispered behind closed doors, questioning their methods, their motives, even the truth of the events. But Ed didn't care. He'd seen too much. One night, as he archived the final tape from the séance, he paused. A whisper, faint but unmistakable, echoed from the recording. "Next time, she'll call me." It wasn't Daniel's voice, it was female. They had banished the entity, but they had also awakened something deeper, something that didn't forget. Months passed. The Madsons moved out of their house in Brookfield, relocating to a quiet neighborhood in upstate New York under new identities. The church officially closed the investigation, classifying it as spiritual disturbance with potential psychological overlap. But the Warrens knew better. Lorraine continued to receive letters from Daniel, sweet, innocent letters, drawings, prayers, poems, and every now and then, a darker note. "Sometimes I still hear him in my dreams," one read, "but I don't listen." Another simply said, "Is it wrong to miss the power?" Lorraine never shared that one with Ed. Meanwhile, kept Daniel's case file under lock and key, stored in a hidden drawer at the Warren Occult Museum. Alongside cursed objects and evidence from hundreds of investigations, Daniel's case held a special place. Not because it was the most violent, but because it was the most personal. This case had marked Lorraine, not just psychically but physically. Since the trance walk, she'd suffered fainting spells and migraines unlike any before. Doctors found nothing wrong, but Lorraine knew. She had seen too much on the other side. One evening, years later, while preparing for a lecture on spiritual warfare, Ed noticed Lorraine staring at a candle on their altar. She looked distant. "What is it?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "I think I saw him again, in the crowd, watching me. But not as the boy, as the thing, the quiet man." Ed placed his hand on hers. "You think it followed us?" "I think it never left," she replied. "Not completely." That night, Lorraine added Daniel's case to her personal journal. On the final page, beneath the drawing of a shadowed figure with a crooked smile, she wrote, "Some spirits leave footprints, others leave stains, and some wait for you to fall asleep." Despite everything, the Warrens continued their work. Cases came and went. The media called them frauds. Survivors called them heroes. But Daniel's case, they never discussed it publicly, not because they were afraid, but because they couldn't bear to relive it. To this day, the tape remains sealed in their archive, untouched, unedited, unplayed, and on the label, a warning, handwritten by Ed. "Do not listen after dark."